Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Katerina Schrey, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett and our program producer, Professor Larry Charest. We host a weekly panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We very much appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post questions for our guests. A quick greeting to our viewers in Ukraine. Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким поклоном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі. Today's guests will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett. The rest of us, to conserve bandwidth, let's turn off our cameras and microphones until the time comes for questions.
Thank you, Katerina. Welcome, everyone, to the 113th meeting of M-Ukraine discussion group at Marshall University, West Virginia. I'm glad to introduce today Artemii Levkoy from Oxford, United Kingdom, who will tell us about Oxford New Russian Society, a student non-profit organization, and Artemii is Cultural Events Secretary at this society. Welcome, Artemii and friends.
Thank you very much, Victor, for inviting me to your podcast. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. First, I would like to say that initiatives like yours are crucial for countering Russian state propaganda and ensuring that people in the West do not accept the war as a necessary evil. And this very much aligns with the work we do at the Oxford New Russian Society. And it is very reassuring to know that we are not alone in this. Okay, without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about the cultural and volunteering activities of the Oxford New Russian Society. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
So I have prepared some slides which should take about 20 minutes. And we also have a couple of our committee members here today who will share their experience with the society. And then I would be happy to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A session. The Oxford New Russian Society is a student organization founded in May 2023 and affiliated with the University of Oxford. Here you can see an excerpt from our constitution. Apologies for such a busy slide. I was just trying to be eco-friendly and save some paper. So our primary objectives are building a diverse community. We foster a community of individuals with various Russia-related backgrounds who aim to co-create a new, peaceful and free Russia. The society represents the voices of Russian democrats, anti-militarists and anti-imperialists, acknowledging the intersecting identities and experiences of our members. Second, we provide a safe and inclusive space. We offer a space for critical engagement with the Russian and Soviet imperial legacy, its lasting impact, and the dynamics of power and oppression in today's Russian context and beyond. The society values the emancipatory and empowering potential of Russian and indigenous cultures while critically engaging with their oppressive aspects. We strive to promote a deeper understanding of Russian and indigenous cultures and facilitate transformative discussions that contribute to building a more just society. We also serve as a networking platform for individuals passionate about shaping an inclusive and equitable future for Russia. The society fosters connections across diverse backgrounds and perspectives. We aim to provide a space at the University of Oxford for discussions on Russian history, current politics, and future reforms with a focus on elevating the narratives and contributions of marginalized communities. By promoting critical discussion, the society aims to prevent revanchism and actively work towards a future where aggression becomes impossible. As of now, our society has a social media audience of almost 600 people, many of whom are based in Oxford. We have an executive committee, including 11 people, some of whom you can see in the picture. On the committee, we've got a senior member who's a professor at Oxford, a president, Anastasia, who's with us today, a secretary, a treasurer, IT officer, event officer, welfare officer, designer, and a cultural event secretary. Our activities fall into 4 categories. First, political activism, volunteering, and fundraising. Second, social events. Third, educational speaker events disseminating knowledge about Russian politics, society, and science. Fourth, the Blue Lamp event. I will cover each of the categories in more detail, starting from political activism, volunteering, and fundraising. On the 4th of June 2023, we joined the international campaign in support of political prisoners and organized a rally in Oxford as our very first event. On the 30th of October, our society commemorated the Day of Political Prisoners by sharing stories of victims of political repressions in the 1930s and current political prisoners as part of the global vigil Returning the Names, Возвращение имен. And we also wrote letters to political prisoners in Russia. On the 29th of November, we protested a speaker event featuring Andrei Kelin, the Russian ambassador to the UK, with support from the university's Ukrainian society. The protest was covered in local newspapers such as the Chervel, the university-based newspaper, as well as TASS, the Russian state news agency. On the 16th of February 2024, we organized a vigil for Alexei Navalny. We collaborate with several anti-war organizations based in London, including the Russian Democratic Society, which is the largest and most influential white-blue-white organization in the UK. We share information about fundraising campaigns, such as those launched to support Ukrainians affected by the Novokakhovka dam explosion. About 2 years ago, one of our members, Anya, began offering free English classes to Ukrainian refugees in Oxford. This project has grown thanks to a committed group of Oxford University students, graduates, and local residents. Now, Anya and her team provide evening English classes every weekday throughout term time in various Central Oxford College classrooms. We actually have another committee member, Sasha, who's also involved in this initiative and who would like to say a couple of words here today during the Q&A session. So we're moving on to social events. Our society organizes monthly social events such as pub crawls, karaoke sessions, and game nights. We also have weekly training sessions for the Russian quiz game Что, где, когда. And by the way, our team is named Oxford Comma, and it will be participating in the British National Tournament next week. We also have educational speaker events. The first one featured an immigration lawyer who discussed various visa routes for postgraduates in the UK. The second event was a screening of the documentary Navalny, co-organized with OVD Info, an NGO supporting political prisoners in Russia. After the screening, a representative from OVD Info provided insights into the current landscape of political imprisonment in Russia and offered guidance on how we can assist those fighting for their rights and freedom. Yesterday, we hosted a talk by Dr. Mikhail Rochlitz, an associate professor in the economics of Russia, Eastern Europe, and Eurasia at the University of Oxford. The lecture was titled Towards a War Economy, Where Does Russia's Economy Stand 2 years into the full-scale invasion of Ukraine? Finally, we have the mysterious Blue Lamp event. The Blue Lamp is a spin-off project that began as a YouTube channel. Here's a short intro from one of the upcoming videos.
Hello everyone, my name is Artemii Levkoy, and this is The Blue Lamp. In a series of events featuring prominent writers, poets, philosophers, and musicians, we delve into various subjects ranging from creative writing and language to music and visual arts. The format of these gatherings spans from interviews and Q&A sessions to public lectures and performances.
The project was inspired by the legendary Green Lamp, a literary political cycle that thrived in St. Petersburg from 1819 to 1820. Founded by the Decembrists, the group boasted luminaries such as Delvig, Pushkin, Trubetskoy, Tolstoy, not to be confused with Leo Tolstoy, Kaverian, and Glinga, among its approximately 20 members. The Green Lamp's gatherings featured readings and discussions encompassing poetry, theatrical reviews, and historical and political articles, many opposing the Tsar. United in their pursuit of freedom, equality, and the dismantling of tyranny, the Green Lamp members left an indelible mark on their era. In the spirit of this historical cycle, the Blue Lamp stands as a contemporary platform for intellectual exchange and creative exploration. Our first Blue Lamp event was a series of poetry nights with Roma Liberev, a director whose work includes mixed media films commemorating Russian writers and poets. He produced musical albums inspired by the poems of Osip Mandelstam and the first wave Russian emigration poets. The event included a screening of Roma's film about Osip Mandelstam, a Q&A session with the director, and a lecture on the poets of the first wave Russian emigration. The lecture was followed by poetry recitations. Our second Blue Lamp event was a public interview featuring Christina Gocheva-Newberry, a rising star in the American literary scene. The topic of our conversation was exophony, also known as translingualism, that is, creative writing in a foreign language. We discussed whether the language of writing shapes an author's artistic identity or connects them to a specific literary tradition. The interview was followed by poetry recitations. This event was co-organized by the London Group of Multilingual Writers, which is so far the largest community of Russian-speaking authors in the UK. You can watch the full interview with Christina on our YouTube channel, but for now I would like to show you a short trailer.
My mother took the book from me with the same authority. She did things around the house, cooked, cleaned, ironed, and continued reading silently for a few minutes before passing the book back to me. If you want to be happy, the chief thing is not to want anything. She frowned, but only for an instant, adding, great writer, awful fate. All great writers had awful fates, at least in this country, Simonov said. That time, nobody contradicted, and nobody laughed, staring silently at the coals. The kebabs hissed and dripped juices, which caught fire in a brief row of flames, then died down again.
Assuming that some members of the Ukraine's audience might be exophonic writers, I think many of you might find this discussion very relevant, so I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Another Blue Lamp event was a talk on Russian poetry and power in Russia delivered by Professor Andrei Zorin, who specializes in Russian literature and cultural history of the 18th and 19th century at the University of Oxford. In the interview, Professor Zorin reflected on his experiences with the so-called Moscow conceptualists, and particularly with Dmitry Prigev's circle. The event was dedicated to the recently deceased poet Lev Rubinstein, who, like Prigev, also belonged to the Moscow conceptualist movement. Our milestone cultural event so far was a chamber concert by Boris Grebenshchikov and his band BG Plus in the Hollywood Music Room, the oldest custom-built concert hall in Europe. Grebenshchikov is one of the major stars of Russian rock music and the leader of the former band Aquarium. He's also a public intellectual. Boris Grebenshchikov is especially dear to our society because in these dark times he remains faithful to the ideals of his songs, which many of us grew up with. Shortly we will be releasing a film about the concert, including my interview with Boris, on the Blue Lamp channel. In the meanwhile, I would like to show you a brief teaser. Part of it will be in Russian, and I haven't added English subtitles yet, so I apologize to those of you who do not understand Russian.
Константин, Валентин, Иннокентий. Да, я тоже Егор. Борис. Я хочу вообще отдыхать, пока я еще живой. Для меня Оксфорд по-своему сердце Англии. Может быть, даже и голова. Не исключено, что еще другие какие-то органы. Зависит от того, что мы называем русским миром.
Есть ли поэты, повлиявшие на вас как на личность и, самое важное, как на автора текстов?
Раскрою вам тайну, о которой, по-моему, я никогда никому еще не говорил. Нет, я человек беспринципный.
Does music make anything happen?
Oh, yeah. It changes people. Мне хочется писать такие слова, чтобы люди говорили, ой, как можно, но вот лучше бы я сам не сказал. Бывает так, что просто бегаешь и смотришь, где же этот автомат, когда он нужен.
Как справиться с похмельем в 30 лет и в 70?
С похмельем?
Да.
А что это? По какому поводу? Это достаточно империалистическое что-то.
We have 3 Blue Lamp events planned for this term. On the 17th of May, I will interview Lenore Garalik, one of the most prominent authors writing in Russian today. We will discuss the Resistance and Opposition Arts Review, RAW, a bi-monthly online publication she initiated in March 2022 after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. RAW features poetry, essays, prose, plays, visual art, multimedia projects, and music that speaks out against war and repression. We'll discuss the project and the latest trends in wartime literature, including Lenore's novel Bobo. Lenore will also recite some of her poetry in Russian and English. Proceeds from the event will be donated to Volunteer 86, a Ukrainian humanitarian aid center working in Kharkiv. In late May, we will host an artist talk by Pavel Adelnov, a multimedia artist working primarily in painting and installations. He explores subjects such as urban space, the environment, historical memory, and Soviet history. His works are in major collections, including the Tretyakov Gallery, the Russian State Museum in St. Petersburg, and many others. This talk will serve as a preliminary event for Pavel's exhibition in Oxford, which our society will host in October. On the 30th and 31st of May, we have a series of events dedicated to Boris Pasternak. First, we will host an interview with Nicholas Pasternak-Slater, a translator of Boris Pasternak's work and his nephew. I want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about Boris Pasternak's descendants in Oxford, because I find this story amazing. Boris Pasternak's father, Leonid, was forced to flee with his wife Rosalia and their 2 daughters, Lydia and Josephine, first from Stalin's Russia in 1921, and then from Hitler's Germany in 1938. Leonid spent the last 6 years of his life in Oxford, and an amazing archive of his paintings, drawings, and sketches has been assembled by his grandchildren in the family house, where he lived and died in 1945. Lydia Pasternak married the British psychiatrist Elliot Slater and had 3 children, Michael, Nicholas, and Anne, who founded the Pasternak Trust. After the public interview with Nicholas, we have planned a visit to the Pasternak Gallery in Oxford, where Anne Pasternak-Slater will guide us through the house. Finally, we will enjoy a piano recital by Hannah Elizabeth Tao featuring pieces composed by Boris Pasternak. All these events will be meticulously recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel, so if you're interested, again, I encourage you to subscribe. Now, I would like to share some general thoughts on the role of activities promoting Russian-speaking culture and literature amidst the ongoing war in Ukraine. Critics may immediately dismiss these efforts as imperialist, or worse still, as war propaganda. At first glance, this reaction is understandable. Why promote the culture of an aggressive, expansionist state, if not to cleanse its reputation? This is where a critical distinction between state, nation, and country is essential. A nation is a cultural unit, often defined by shared language, history, values, ethnicity, or a combination of these elements. By contrast, a state is a political unit encompassing a government and its institutions. A country is a nebulous concept often used to mean a nation state. So that is a state created to be the political side of a nation, an organization in which the state and nation are congruent. So why promote a culture from an aggressive expansionist country like Russia? The answer lies in recognizing that culture belongs to a nation, not to a state. I find this concept horribly obvious and clear, but yet it's frequently overlooked by many, especially those affected by the actions of the Russian state. A common counter-argument to this is that a nation deserves the government it has. This is a very popular Russian cliche. Actually, this idea is very archaic, and it originates in the works of French conservatives of the 18th century, such as Joseph de Maistre, and Russian supporters of absolute monarchy of the 19th century, such as Nikolai Karamzin. This belief posits that a nation's poor ruler is divine punishment for its sins, and the only way a nation can get a fair ruler is through repentance and self-betterment. Perhaps there is a grain of truth to the latter, but I think that shaming, which some Russians promoting Russian culture face these days, is definitely not the best way to encourage improvement. This cliche is also similar to Russians are a slave nation. You might actually think that those who resort to radical generalizations of this kind are just trying to wake up the dormant civil society in Russia, that they actually mean good. This would make sense if the same rhetoric wasn't applied to those Russians who are overtly opposing the regime within and outside the country, often risking their lives. So I would like to repeat once again, Russian culture does not belong to the Russian state, much less so to a small gang of international criminals whose only bedside book is the criminal code of the Russian Federation. Our goal is to prevent our culture from being appropriated and compromised by the state. Ever since the full-scale invasion, Putin's regime has been falsely attributing political views, often regarding Ukraine and other post-Soviet countries, to classics of Russian culture. One good example would be the notorious poem by Joseph Brodsky to Ukraine's independence, На независимость Украины, which was employed by the Russian state propaganda to attribute imperialist views to a Soviet Jew who himself suffered from the empire no less than Ukrainians are suffering now. It is true that the poem expresses Brodsky's resentment towards Ukraine, denying their common ancestry with Russia, but it is far from advocating imperialism, let alone violence. The war in Ukraine is by no means a war between nations. In fact, many soldiers fighting for the Ukrainian military forces speak Russian with each other. In some cases, they might even identify as Russians based on their linguistic and cultural background, while still remaining Ukrainian citizens. Another good example of that would be Ukrainian authors publishing in Russian, such as those from the poetic anthology edited by our host, Victor. So this is not a war between two nations, but a war between a barbaric state and a brave, civilized nation striving for a better future, period. The Oxford New Russian Society aims to liberate Russian culture from the Russian state, much like a surgeon removes a malignant tumor from an otherwise healthy body. And it is reassuring to know that we are not alone in this extremely complicated operation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Artemii. This was very moving and very informative. I will open the discussion, but we first want to hear from your colleagues, I think.
Yes,
Right.
I think Anastasia has a couple of words to say in general, and
Yes,
then
please.
tell us about the English classes for Ukrainian refugees in Oxford.
Please.
I mean, I'm
Unmuted,
happy to give Sasha the floor first. Sasha, if you want to talk about the volunteer efforts. Yeah.
Yes, of course. So I'm Alex. I'm the treasurer of the Oxford New Russian Society, and throughout these past 1.5 to 2 years, we've been promoting our efforts. Well, Anna's idea, another committee member of ours, to find out who needs tutoring in the English language in Oxford, out of the Ukrainian refugees who have come here. And so far, it began as something rather small scale, with just a couple of groups, and snowballed into something much greater, where we now have about 30 students and about 10 teachers teaching them in 3 different Oxford colleges. So what we found in our interactions with the students is that many of them come from backgrounds that might not have had the privilege to access English lessons at home, and their English level is not where it should be for surviving in the UK. And all the classes that they find from other schools, like the Oxford College, for example, that also provide them with the same service, don't have the necessary linguistic preparation to take them from the basic stages to intermediate to advanced stages. And so far, we've been able to take those 30 students, more or less, through about a level or 2 levels of the Common European Framework. And we have a wait list of about 30 more people to join us in the future. So in the next year, we are hoping to expand our efforts and find more volunteer tutors throughout the different colleges and provide them with the necessary training to conduct those classes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anastasia, please.
Yeah, I guess just a few general words about who we are and kind of, why we started to kind of continue on what Artemii was saying. So I'm the current president, and I'm the person who kind of started the initiative and then gathered this group of wonderful people who have been working together for the past year. So it's been honestly amazing. I think one of the things that really, contributed to making this decision to make it a more formal community is because I feel like many Russians felt very lost at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And because of, obviously, all these terrible things happening, they also felt like their identity was completely shattered because they just felt like they lost their home and they didn't know what to do. And so many people got, including myself, got very depressed. And, there was also a component of, kind of trying to almost hide who you are because, how do you live with the fact that your state is basically committing genocide and you're just supposed to, exist while still having, the passport of that country and, there's nothing you can do about it. So I felt like there was this need to, kind of unite people who were sharing this, kind of collective trauma, so to say. And actually, it's been honestly a very good experience. We managed to gather a lot of like-minded people, and I vividly remember, one of the first year Oxford students, an undergrad, coming up to me at the beginning of the year saying like, I was afraid to tell people that I'm from Russia, but, because you guys exist now, I actually don't feel ashamed. And I think it's a great community that we're building, and I'm hoping that, we will carry on. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for these words. And please, comments from our viewers and questions. Katerina?
Just to start off, before I yield to Dean Deutsch, who I see has a question, just a huge thank you for what you all are doing. You've given me, there's so much hope in everything you do. And I'm so impressed and grateful for your mix of, it's both political, it's activism, it's education, it's service. You are ministering to people on all sorts of levels. I also really appreciate like the fact that you make this distinction between state, nation, and country. This is so important, especially right now. And I love that you challenge these ideas of a country as the ruler it deserves. I've heard that so many times, but thank you for unpacking that and explaining that. Thank you for saying things like the Russian culture does not belong to the Russian state. One of in the photos you showed, there is a young woman holding a poster, and the poster says, I am Russian, these people do not represent me. And these are such important images for us. So thank you for taking the time to educate us. And thank you for honestly, your youthful exuberance and strength and courage. There is so much consolation in knowing that you and your organization exists. Thank you for everything you're doing. I'm going to yield the floor to Dean Leonard Deutsch. He is a good friend of our program, former Dean of the Graduate College at Marshall University.
Hello, everyone. As an American, I was brought up after World War II to view the Soviet Union as a kind of monolith. It was the Soviet Union. And I think that they, and evil force, for their part, fostered the idea that they were a monolithic political entity too. So in your first slide, Art showed us that one of the purposes of your organization is to support indigenous cultures. Can you identify the indigenous cultures and then talk about the ways that you're supporting them?
That's a great question.
So if you mean indigenous representatives of indigenous cultures in Oxford, we have Burats, for example, who approached us on many occasions asking if they could help us with our society. And they were clearly looking for a safe space where they could engage with Russian culture while still identifying as ethnic minorities from the Russian Federation. So I would say that that's one example.
Another example is we do have a speaker lined up who will be talking about, for example, Chechnya and what's happening in the region. So we do have speakers in the works, but unfortunately, a lot of them, especially people who are prominent and experts in the field, physically cannot be in Oxford because they are, waiting for political asylum in one of the EU countries. So it's been a bit challenging to kind of physically bring them here. But this is something that we are working on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deutsch. More questions, please, from our audience. If you please.
I have a general question. When you work with the refugees and to Ukrainian refugees and help them teach them English, this is so important. Communication is it's such an important ability. I'm wondering, generally speaking, can you talk a little bit about the situation of Ukrainian refugees in the UK? How are they treated? Are they able to? First of all, are the British receptive to them? Is it too much of? Are they a burden on the community? Is it overwhelming for the local communities to accept this many refugees? Are they able to find work? How does all that work? If you could speak a little bit about the situation of Ukrainian refugees in the UK, I would be very grateful.
I think I will take it. Okay. Go ahead, and I will just add a couple of.
Oh yeah, of course. So last time I checked, I can speak just for Oxfordshire because I haven't had experience with talking to other Ukrainian refugees from elsewhere in the UK. Last time I checked, we had about 2,300 people living in Oxfordshire, in and around Oxford, and the effort to welcome Ukrainian refugees started right after the invasion happened in February 2022 with the Homes for Ukraine program, where UK residents could provide a spare room in their house to refugees from Ukraine. At the same time, getting some reimbursements or payments from the government to cover their daily expenses on running the household. And on the financial side, I think all Ukrainian refugees are actually eligible for universal credit in the UK, which is a welfare program that helps them with renting once they have moved out from their host's house, and with some living expenses. And once they start working, they'll have that welfare payment cut in accordance with hours they work. So I think on the government side, it's a pretty well implemented welfare program, although the amounts aren't that huge, so it leaves much to be desired. But I think from the refugees I've talked to, they're managing to adapt just fine here.
It's wonderful.
I would also like to add that there is a scholarship in Oxford which was founded in 2022 specifically for Ukrainian refugees, and 24 scholars received the scholarship in 2023. So in the last academic year. That number has shrunk a little bit this year, but still I think the university and the government are doing a great job providing financial support to Ukrainian refugees to study at top universities like Oxford or Cambridge.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. My parents came to the United States as refugees in the 1950s after World War II, and they 100% relied on the kindness and generosity of strangers, being completely new in a new land. And it brings tears to my eyes, the generosity that you're reflecting in what you're sharing with us. I'm so grateful for that. I do have another comment, and then I will yield the microphone. And it has to do with when you talked about the origin of the name of the Blue Lamp Society. It's a Blue Lamp Society. I put the link in the chat, and it's in honor. It's a tribute to the Green Lamp, founded by the Decembrists. It is amazing how again and again throughout history we see the power of the arts. Poets, writers, like there's a saying that the poet is a second government, and I don't remember who said that, but the poets embody the voice of the people. Every culture has those poets that stand out and speak for the people and the voiceless. And so it's the poets, it's the artists, it's the performing arts, the theater. It's amazing the value of the liberal and fine arts and how key that is in healing and building a country. So just thank you again for your presentations. Victor, I'm going to toss it back to you and as we await more questions. But it's such a beautiful, we don't think of that. We think of society advancing because of technology. And this is all true because of science. And this is all true. But the fact that the arts themselves, that's where the leadership, the creativity, the imagination, the power, the spirit all comes from. So thank you.
Interestingly, this is not the first reiteration of the Green Lamp. There was another Green Lamp founded by Merezhkovsky and Gippius in the 1920s when they immigrated to Europe. I think they settled in Paris. And the idea of that cycle was pretty much similar to the idea of the Blue Lamp. And I think there are many other examples of societies like that go by the same name. So this is a very sort of long-standing tradition.
Well, thank you. Please, when you get a chance, check the chat to make sure I put the correct link in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Artemii and Alexander and Anastasia. And thank you, Katerina, for reminding us that the voice of those who cannot be silent, including artists and poets, are important. And of course, not every one of our American audience will recognize names of Boris Grebenshchikov or Lenore Goralik, but I assure you that these names are well known among Russian speakers across the world. And it all boils down to our ability to express ourselves and basically fighting for the future. And I'm so glad to see our counterparts from Oxford University on the other side of Atlantic being on the right side of the future, so to say, especially with what is going on with American university campuses right now as I speak. More questions, please. More comments from our viewers. Carol, please. Dr. Smith is the professor at Marshall University. She teaches trauma counseling, of all things.
Hello, how are you all? So,
All right, thank you.
Victor Fett and I had an email conversation just yesterday about fatigue and how we get tired and we wonder how long we can keep doing things. And what you have given us as the old people, I mean, look at us, we're so much older than you are. You give us hope, you give us energy to keep going, and that is a beautiful thing. And not only that, you have found one another, you have found each other in Oxford to pull together and to address this very complicated identity and need. And that is the illustration of not only rebellion, but also resilience. And it's a lovely, lovely combination of transgression and also the word is escaping me right now, but transcendence, transcending your circumstances, and at the same time transgressing against the way that the powers that be tell you that you must behave. And you are finding creative ways creative, life-affirming ways to say, nope, that is not who we are. That's not who we are. We are this. And you're not just railing against the powers that be. You are showing a different way. You're showing it. You're embodying it and living it. And there's nothing stronger and there's nothing more valuable. So kudos to all of you for what you're doing, and starting a society is a lot of work. There's all the meta things that you have to do to become organized and recognized and all of those things. There's a lot. It's like starting a business. There's a lot there that you're doing on top of what it is you're passionate about. So these are all terrific, terrific things. And I'm so grateful that I was able to log in and hear about what you're doing. Thank you so much. So I didn't have a question. I just wanted to encourage you. Just keep going. Just keep doing it. You're awesome.
Thank you. This is very
Thank you.
reassuring.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. Thank you. While we're waiting for more questions, I might have one. Dr. Deutsch, Mark,
I just
you have one.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to
please.
ask Katerina addressed, or her question addressed, the question of Ukrainian refugees, but do you have any sense of the ratio of refugees from Russia as opposed to Ukrainian refugees?
I don't have any data regarding the UK. Actually, I was reading an article in the newspapers yesterday, and it said that only about 5 or 10% of Russians who applied for political asylum got it. So it's a very, very small number. I personally have not encountered a single Russian refugee in the UK over the 2 years that I've spent here. So I wouldn't say that this is a common phenomenon.
Okay.
I think it's,
Well, in my
I mean,
experience, yeah, go on, sorry.
yes, Ash, please go ahead. I can go after you.
Okay. Yeah, in my experience, I think I've only met one refugee from Russia who used to head an LGBT organization, which even prior to the law which branded LGBT people extremists was shut down, was first of all pressured, declared a foreign agent, and then shut down. So that's the only case I've ever heard of in the UK of a successful asylum claim.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of anyone in the UK, but there is definitely, you know, a lot of Russians who left because of the war. I mean, I don't know if we have numbers, but most people move to places where they wouldn't require visa, for example. So it would be Turkey, Montenegro, Serbia, where it's kind of easier, so to say, to get permanent residency. The UK is obviously not one of those countries, but there are different organizations of Russian expats that are working towards helping Russian refugees, so to say. So in the UK, as Artemii mentioned, there is Russian Democratic Society, which is actively fundraising for, helping people leave Russia who don't have the means. There is also the anti-war committee. There is Project Kovcheg. So there is lots of kind of ground-up initiatives run by volunteers, but unfortunately, it's difficult to get local governments to cooperate. So it's very difficult to get any support from the governments. And obviously, if there is no, facilitation for visas or for residency permits for Russians who escape Russia because of the war, then it's just incredibly difficult. And I mean, many people left, my family included, and yeah, they did face lots of bureaucratic issues. This is something that is probably, it will take time to fix, but there is people working on it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. Any more questions, please? We are engaged in a very broad and, I would say, very intense discussion here. I don't want really to ask many questions about cancel culture and things like this. You said enough to us. You're trying to create your own profile of culture, so to say. Artemii, can you tell us what other luminaries, what other names you have in mind? Who of them actually are residing now in the UK who you would like to have?
Yes, luckily London has become, I would say, the second largest community for Russian artists outside of Russia. Probably Berlin is the largest one right now. And we've been considering inviting people like Mikhail Khodorkovsky, first of all, because he has an immediate connection to Oxford, because he provides many Russian students with scholarships. He founded the Hill Foundation, and I think around 15 students who graduated from Russian universities are eligible to apply for this scholarship yearly. Nasta, would you like to mention somebody else?
I mean, we are working on, kind of gauging the interest from the people in Oxford, who they want to see. There is a very nice Russian and Eastern European Eurasian Studies Center, right, Alex? Am I naming them correctly?
Right.
Yeah, so they are very active and they have excellent speakers, and we collaborate with them, which is very nice because our senior member, sort of an advisor to the society, is actually the director of that institute. So it kind of places us really nicely in terms of getting interesting people to come. So yeah, but as I was saying, visas and other things are always in the way to kind of organize things in person. But we're working on things, so let's see. Fingers crossed.
Thank you. Of course, many of us know that Boris Akunin is in England, if I'm not mistaken, residing there. So maybe he will make a good speaker if he agrees for your activities. Probably one of the most known writers.
Thank you for suggesting that. We'll definitely discuss
yes.
that.
On this program, we reached to many people across the world, and sometimes we get very interesting persons and contacts. So it is great to have you here, and you may be some kind of a model for an academic community. Of course, our universities are not exactly comparable. I'm not going as far as comparing Marshall to Oxford, but here we are right now talking across the ocean about the most important things of, if you wish, modern history in making. So if I have more comments from our audience, please ask them and tell your regards to our guests before we complete this hour. Please, everyone. It reminds me also of Nabokov's Glory, Podvig, where if you recall, there is a Cambridge professor named Archibald Moon, and this happened exactly 100 years ago, when Moon, who was Russia expert in 1910s, talked about the end of the culture as he knew it, and very, very grim and pessimistic view already 100 years ago. So we all have things on which to rely and to draw for comparison. We hope that this cycle will be different with your generation. I have something in chat, I believe.
On a related note, if we have minutes, Nabokov founded the first Russian-speaking society in the UK in Cambridge, just 100 years ago.
Yes, that's good. And I have a note on chat from our student. I will attend to this. We do have a lot of interesting people here and there, and we try to fish out some of them. But thank you, and we will definitely post your links and links to your video and all the information on our YouTube recording. Any closing remarks, please, Dr. Shrey?
Just our traditional ending, if I may proceed with that.
Yes, please.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці до наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям
Героям
слава!
слава.